Hi everyone. I'm filling in for Bailey today and tomorrow. He's currently in Perth, delivering some IWIB practical training. So my name's Joe Sandor. I don't think I've had you guys at all, have I? During this course. So I'm going to just take you through the next two lectures. Have you guys had the opportunity to have a look at the videos that Bailey's posted on 9606 and the other standard 15614 at all by any chance? No. Well, he's done a really good job. I recommend if you get the opportunity to look at it on Moodle, it will certainly help in the actual when you're actually doing the practical session. Is it you guys coming here next week? Who's coming to Wollongong? Yeah, Aaron, you're here next week, yeah. So it's just just an advantage that if you've had a look at it, it will help you in your time frame. You know, you're not wasting a lot of time if you're a little bit unsure. But I'm going to go through the two standards that you're going to be referencing. Now, you will get a book of specifications. What that book of specifications does, it gives you the actual criteria as far as your defects are concerned, particularly when you're assessing some of the wells that you'll be looking at. So naturally we go through that on the day and how to do the calcs and so forth. But we'll give you a rundown on basically 9606 because there is a welder qualification that you have to go over and you have to work out, basically what is missing probably from that document, and generally where it's missing is from the range of qualifications. So by understanding the information in the standard, it's going to help you not only navigate your way through there, but also work out what is wrong with that document. Then the other standard that we go through is more about the weld procedure documentation that you go through. And let me tell you, gents, they are quite a difficult document to look at. They're very small lettered, worded sort of documents. So, they're a little bit hard to read. So we just got to make sure that we get a good understanding on where the type of information sits with the standards. Now, an IWIB, IWI-S, particularly 9606 is one document that both are covered in both those sessions. But you guys get a different standard when it comes to the weld procedure or the WPQR because, naturally that you're the next level. So we'll go through 9606 and we'll just give you a rundown on where the information is sitting. And then naturally, of course, on the practical training, we go through that again. But we're just trying to give you a heads up on where information sits in related to the standards when you're here doing your practical training. Because like you'll spend at least a day on practical samples, and then you'll spend a day on the documentation. So X-ray, your welder quals, your certificates and your NDT and so forth. So there's a bit of work involved in the documentation side of it. So let's start to go through 9606. So this particular standard, and I've got it with me at the moment, so I don't know if you guys have got it with you. It's not a very thick standard, it's quite a thin standard. So it's just a matter of understanding, particularly the information in it, where we've seen people sort of, I wouldn't say stumble, but if they're very familiar with Australian standards, this one's a real sort of lot different in the way things are said and worded. And the fact too that we're referencing, welding processes that are very unfamiliar to most guys, particularly with their numbering system for their processes, the positioning systems. These are the sort of things that are all on these documents that you've got to be fully aware of. And also some of the, the acronyms and stuff that they use is very unfamiliar if you're not used to the ISO type standards. So 9606, qualification testing welders of fusion welding steels. And basically scope, the first part in scope, it says this part of 9606 specifies the requirements of the qualification testing of welders for fusion welding of steels. It provides a set of technical rules for a systematic qualification test for the welder and enables such qualifications to uniformly accepted independently of the type of product, location, and examiner or examining body. The welding processes referred to in this part are fusion welding processes, which are designed as a manually or a partial mechanized, fully mechanized, or automated welding process are not covered. Now, what we're seeing at the moment is we're seeing a lot of companies going down the 9606 pathway. And one of the main reasons is the range of qualification it offers, but also the time frame it offers. And it works out more beneficial for businesses if we've got your operators are actually more qualified to 9606. And if you compare 9606 to 2980, which is our Australian standard, it's on par as far as your time frame is before you re-qualify or you retest your operators. So, but what we find in this one is we get a wider range of qualification, and that's the beauty of this particular standard, is giving us a much broader range to cover the operators. So from an inspector's point of view, a lot of the times you might be verifying the documentation from a business. Let's say you're coming in, or your company's asked you to go and check a subcontract company that you might be working under you guys. It's knowing that you understand the way the 9606 is set up, and that you can identify and make sure that the operators are working within the range of qualification that the standard outlays. So it's knowing where it all sits. So if you look at section 2, it's just normative references. So in that particular part, all they're doing is in section 2 is referencing the various ISO standards. So you'll see, different little ISO standards that are referenced in there. But then when we go into section 3, and like I said, they're only small sections. It's not a very big standard. It talks about terms and definitions. And you might be unfamiliar and you might get stuck with some of the terms, but section 3 contains it all. So what you'll often find is when you're very new to this, section 3, section 4 in particular, is where I often see students going to and fro just to get their head around the numbering system, what some of the terminology, the consumables, that sort of thing. But when you're looking at terms and definitions, is what they're talking about there, welder, person who holds and manipulates the electrode holder, welding torch and blowpipe by hand. You know what I mean? Manufacturer, examiner, examining body, material backing. This is where, some of the terms that they're referencing, what it means as we go through the standard. But where it comes more so, I think, is when you go to section 4, because this is where really the nuts and bolts are as far as the terminology, particularly when we're looking at the documentation side, because of what we're going to verify. So it outlines the abbreviated technical trade language used throughout the standard. Once again, you might have to reference it just to get your head around it, and I'd expect that. If you're not familiar with the standard, I would definitely expect you to be going backwards and forwards just so you've got your head around some of the terminology that they reference in there. And if you have a look at it, first and foremost, we've got the identification of our welding processes. So this is a very unique system that the ISO have, and they certainly identify their welding processes numerically like this. And what you'll often find sometimes on a welder qual is we might have a multi-process welder qualification. No doubt in my mind you probably will get that, where root run's being done with one process and then fill and cap with another. So it's not going to, don't be surprised if you get that. Naturally you're going to get that probably in your training, but also in your examination. It's not very common where they give you just one process. They often give you multiple, because the range of qualification, when you start looking at range of the thickness that you're covered for, the range it's covered for, the processes and that, the wire you're using, all these variations there, and the range of qualification becomes quite large. So getting familiar with what they say there in the actual numbering. So it's not uncommon to see let's say 141 TIG, and maybe 138 or 135 or 136 or something like that as another process in there. You might even get 111 for the and then flux core with 138 as a fill. So you'll see variations. So getting familiar with the numbering side of it, but don't forget it's open book for you guys when you're looking at the standard. When you start going through the documents, you've naturally got these documents to reference. But I would like you to sort of try and get familiar with some of this stuff. Your symbols and your abbreviation terms, A represents throat thickness, BW butt well, D outside diameter pipe. These are the things that you'll see a lot on the documents, okay? So they're going to reference these sort of things, and we just have to, I wouldn't expect you to know them off the top of your head, but know where that information sits when you're actually going through the practical training, where to find what that represents, okay? Of course, you've got other terminology, your filler materials, like particularly your consumables, the flux coatings that they reference. And then, of course, you've got your different types of wires. The range of qualification, you could do a solid wire, it will cover you for metal core wire. These are the sort of things that we look at. The one thing I want you to really sort of look at too is where it's got for other well details. So 4.3.3, it's got FB, BS, CI, LW. What these, often you'll see these on the documents, is you're going to have naturally the welding process, but they'll stipulate whether it's flux backing or it's welded single layer, multi-layer, and they're only going to use those abbreviations on the document. All right, so this is the sort of thing that they're going to put on the document. So getting familiar with naturally the numbering system, getting familiar with your filler materials is also going to help, but also those other weld details. If we've got a single layer, multi-layer, we've got material backing, this sort of thing, where they mention it. So, because the first thing you look at when you're looking at your documentation, particularly for 9606, is a designation. So that's the first thing you look at when you're looking at your document, because that's going to give you the full detail on what took place on this welder qualification. And then basically you're just verifying that and then making sure then when you see all that and you understand all that, then we look at what the range of qualification is, because that's where they're going to stuff you up. It's where they're not going to put things in, or it's going to be missing that, the other, and so forth. So that is the first important part when looking at this particular document, is the designation, and that tells you everything. What type of weld it was, what process it was, everything that you need. If it was a supplementary fillet weld was put in as well. And we'll go through that. So that's the first thing I would want you to look at when you were to review a document, is that designation right at the top of the document. All right, because it's got all this abbreviation stuff there. So by knowing that and reading that right at the beginning, it gives you the heads up on naturally understanding the process, and it helps you guide your way through knowing what the range of qualification needs to be when we go through it. It's quite simple when you've got that worked out, because then it's more of a table reference more than anything as you work your way down the document. So it's good in that sense. But understanding the designation is the key part of that document to help you with navigating and working out exactly what range of qualification is covered. Okay, so try and get, before the practical training, it'd be nice if you could literally, I'm not expecting you to know it off by heart, but just have a look at it and get your head around a little bit. I think there's a practice one on Moodle there you can look at. And like I said, Bailey's done an excellent video on the navigation and understanding the way that document works and how you're going to navigate your way through in relation to this document. So if you get the opportunity, by all means, look at it as well. Okay. Excuse me. So section 4 does contain a fair bit of information, particularly regarding the terminology that they're using in the document. Then when we go into section 5, it basically lists the essential variables and the range of qualification. So when we get into this section here, this is where we start to see a lot of our tables in reference to basically our range of qualification. That's where we're going to see positioning. We're going to see, consumables. All the detail is there now, basically in section 5. So this outlines the range of qualification based on the parameters of the test that was undertaken. So by looking at that designation at the top of the document, that's what sets this all up, because that is what's taken place. That is true to as it's written, and then we just got to follow it. So what it'll do is the document, when you're looking at it, and there's an appendix at the back of this standard shows you the document. But when you actually look at the document, and if I draw it up for you guys, can this work? No, my pen's not working. Why is that? Oh no, frozen. Oh no. Okay, gents, just bear with me. My screen's just completely frozen. Bear with me for a sec. Yeah, it actually happened to me yesterday while I was lecturing, where it actually froze on me. And what it means, as soon as that does it, I can't do anything, can't move forward, can't move backwards, I can't do anything. So when we're looking at our document, like I was saying, what you'll find is when we're looking at it and we look at, the way the document is, hopefully my pen will work again. Yeah. On the document like so, what you'll have is naturally the top part where our designation will sit, and then it will be split down that side. So what that designation is showing is what took place on this side of the document. Okay. And it's all listed. It's numbered like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can keep a track of that. And then on the opposite side is the actual range of qualification. So what we've got to verify right at the beginning when we're going through 9606 in particular and verifying that what is being done is we're going to check the designation. Then we're going to work our way down through that, from that designation, that the information that we see on this side of the document aligns with that designation. And then once we can clarify that, then we can start looking at the range of qualification that comes off this side of it. All right. So that's where section 5 is where we'll tend to be when we're verifying, particularly the range of qualification, but any other information there that we see, what took place, we're going to be basically in this section. So the qualification of welders is based on essential variables. For each essential variable is a range of qualification. If the welder is to be welded outside their qualified range, a new qualification test is required. The essential variables for the standard are as follows. So what it means from an operator's point of view is whatever type of weld that he's done in relation to process, thickness ranges and so forth, when we've worked out the range of qualification, he must work within that range. If he goes outside that range, we've got to then consider re-qualifying. So that's why we've got that. It's an essential variable. We'll give him that range so we can weld from that to that. If he comes outside that or under that, he's not qualified. So it's a matter of working out, when they put this, developing welder quals to 9606, it's making sure that it's suited for the environment that you're particularly working in. You know what I mean? It's always best set up with the type of joints that you're dealing with. So when we're looking at essential variables side of it, if you look here in this little chart, and it says there parent materials are not an essential variable. Okay, so if you start to look at these ones in particular, we got 5.1 general. Then we look at general is where we look at what it says there. So basically it's saying the qualification of welders is based on essential variables. For each essential variable, a range of qualification is defined. And then if the welder has to weld outside the range of welder qualification, a new qualification test is required. These are the essential variables. So we've got welding process. So naturally, whatever welding process is used or done in, it'll only be qualified in that. Where we often see a variation is naturally fill and material group or that sort of thing. All right. So the type of consumable, we get a range there. Product type, so is it basically plate or is it pipe, tube? And they do consider RHS and SHS in this standard. Then the type of weld that we're looking at, the filler material group, and then the filler material type. So we can get a range of both those dimensions, welding position, of course, weld details, and then at the end we've got note. So these are the ones that they consider an essential variable. Now you can go to the back of the standard in section 11, I think it is. If I go to that, it basically says that, and this is another thing to look at too when you are looking at it. It says there, with particularly 10 and 11, which is on page 25 on my standard, things that I'd like you to read before you come to do your practical training, particularly with section 11, because it's talking about the designation that I was talking about at the beginning. The designation of a weld qualification shall comprise with the following items in the given order. So the number of part, so ISO 9606, and then it goes through the essential variables. Excuse me. So welding process should be the first thing we see. The second part should be the product type, whether it's plate, pipe, whatever. Then the type of weld, is it a butt weld, a fillet weld? Then 4, the filler material group or parent metal group. 5 should be the filler material types. And then 6, the dimensions of the test piece. 7, welding positions, and then weld details. So that's the order, excuse me, that should be designated on the actual document. So you know then that the welding process should be the first thing that we see on there. So we'll have ISO 9606-1, and then it should have the welding process, the type of, like the plate or tube or whatever it may be. Then is it a butt weld and fillet weld? So that's why I said look at the designation. But when it comes to the weld qualifications, it says there the following non-essential variables shall be recorded on the certificate. So we should still have the type of current and polarity, material, parent material groups and subgroups, and shielding gas, but they're not considered an essential variable. All right. So, but they still got to be documented on the document. So that's, it's funny that that's right at the back of the standard about the designation side of it. But these are the things that we'll be looking at as we go through the particular standard as an essential. So naturally, when we're looking at the welding process, which is going to be, it'll be ISO 9606-1 and then the process. So each test normally qualifies only one welding process, right? A change of welding process requires a new qualification test, although there are exceptions. So a change for 135 to 138 or vice versa does not require requalification. A change from 121 to 125 or vice versa does not require requalification. Welding with 141, 143 or 145 qualifies 141, 142, 143 and 145, but not 142, only qualifies 142. And then qualifying the welder for dip or short arc transfer mode 131, 135 and 138 shall qualify the other transfer modes, but not vice versa. So when we start to look at some of these, the numbers, that's where you need to understand what welding processes we're talking about. So 135, 138, we're looking at mag welding, and 138, we're looking at flux core. So you start to look to identify that 141 TIG with filler wire. The reason they say if you qualify an operator to 141, 143 or 145, often it's the consumable there that's changing the designation on the process, right? But if you look at 142, it is still the TIG process, but is without filler wire. It's autogenous. So it means that you can't, that's why if you've done a filler rod, they will allow you as part of your qualification to have for 142. If you have done 142, in other words, you haven't used a filler wire, then you can't be qualified to use a filler wire. Where they're looking at your MIG, your mag, and your flux core there, they're looking at short arc being one of the crucial transfer modes, in the sense that it's very prone to lack of fusion. So if you could qualify your operators with that transfer mode, yes, I believe they shouldn't have a problem with any other transfer mode, but they won't allow that other transfer modes like a spray arc to cover dip transfer. So it's just a matter of, when you're verifying the documentation, that you've got to be aware of the the range, or the other types of processes that we could be covered for. So when you're looking at it, particularly, let's look at qualifying the operator. Let's say he's done it with 135 in the original part, and it was done in short arc. When we look at the range of qualification, we should also see 131 and 138. So if that's not there, well, that means it's missing. So they're the sort of things we'll be looking at. And like I said, it's a full day's training on going all over these two documents in particular, as well as all the others. So if you can get your heads in the game early, it's certainly going to make a big difference for you when you're actually here to do the training. So when we start going through that, and welding processes in particular, is basically having an understanding of what detail we're looking at, and we understand the actual welding processes themselves. It is permissible to qualify a welder in two welding processes in a single test piece or separate pieces. A deposited thickness range of qualification is based on each welding process. So we start to look at table 1. So if you look at table 1, and I'll show you right here, it means what we're looking at now. Let's say, for instance, we've got a butt joint, and what we've done is we've decided to use one process for the root, and then we've used another process for fill and cap. What it means, our range of qualification is then governed by the thickness of the deposited weld. So we might have two welding processes. Let's say, for instance, we've used 111, and we've used cellulose for the root run, okay? And we now have 5 millimeters as what we would deposit it, and this will be in the designation. This is the thing. This is where this information sits in the designation. And now let's say the second process is now, let's say 135, okay? And that had, let's say, maybe 10 mil, fill and cap. So we've got two welding processes. So what we then verify is, first and foremost, does that line up with the designation? Yeah, it lined up with the designation. So now we've got to look at it from the range of qualification. So one we'd look at is, first and foremost, the 111, okay, and the cellulose, and then see in the range of qualification what other consumables as far as flux coating is covered in there, and is that there, right? Then what we would look at is, what is my range of qualification in my deposited thickness? In other words, we know that we did it in 5 mil, but what is my lower end and what's my maximum range? And that's in a table that we'll go through. And that goes the same for this one. 135, we've done 10 mil in there. What's my lower end? What's my upper end? What other consumable am I covered for in that process, or what other processes? And that's what we're going to verify when we start to look at that documentation, because it's always going to be naturally in what the range of qualification is, you and me. So that's why we look at the designation, we verify the designation with what took place, and make sure that lines up first. That's the first and foremost thing we do when we're looking at that document. Once we align that all up and we say, yeah, we agree that that's correct, then we start looking at the range that it is qualified to. So then we start verifying that through the particular tables. So with this table here, it says table 1 demonstrates that when each process is qualified, separate processes 2, being fill and cap, can qualify as either with process or without backing. So if you look at a butt weld there, you'll see that when we start looking at the other range, the range of qualification, single-sided, right? We've done the first one single-sided. and then we'd have a look at the table there to see what covers from single-sided. But the second one, it was now we've got material backing, because the material backing comes from the first run. So then we then change, that changes slightly the range of qualification now, because it's got material backing, and then there's a table to verify that. So it says there, fill and cap can be qualified as either a process 3 or without backing. Process 4 similar. Process 1 root ridging can separately be qualified, and all can be combined as shown. So we can have separate qualification and range of qualification, not only for what it will cover as far as my range of deposited thicknesses, but whether I've done it single-sided, material backing, what other ranges does it cover? And like I said, that comes in all these tables that we're going to verify. The thing what you'll notice is that they qualify butt joints to deposited thickness, but they qualify fillets to material thickness. So that is something you've got to be aware of when you're going through the standard and looking at the tables, that you are checking the right table. All right, so just to make sure. So we got that there. Product type, which is 5.3. Says there, qualification test shall be carried out on plate, pipe, or other suitable product form. Note, pipe incorporates RHS and SHS in this standard. Plate is also given on a rotating pipe of outside diameter equal to or greater than 75 millimeters, and fixed pipe of outside diameter equal to or greater than 500. Pipe also covers larger diameter and plate if the outside diameter is equal to or greater than 25 mil. So we start to look at that, and that's always going to be governed on what we've done in the original test piece. All right, so then we start to look at, the range of qualification, because what it's saying there when you're looking at plate means if we've done a particular pipe joint, it's over a certain diameter, and we've done a supplementary fillet weld, that will cover for a single layer and a multi-layer. So there's things there we can utilize and use to get a bigger range of qualification through this particular part. So 5.4 is type of weld. So the qualification test shall be carried out as either a butt or a fillet weld with the following criteria. So A, butt welds cover butt welds in any type of joint except branch joints. Now you'll notice there that in the standard, it's got the little letter C. So you could then go down to C, and it says there, butt welds in pipes qualify branch joints with an angle equal to or greater than 60 degrees. So it's already saying there, butt welds cover butt welds in any type of joint except branch connections. But if you go down, providing the branch is equal to or greater than 60 degrees, we can then qualify it from a butt joint. B, butt welds do not comply fillet welds or vice versa. It is permissible to qualify fillet weld in a combination with a butt weld, see Appendix C. Now that's a particular joint configuration. It's an actual bevel plate with backing bar, 12 mil gap, and you've got a square edge plate at the bottom. And it's generally done, we'd often see that done in the PC position. So what it is, and it's at the back of the standard, where you'll have a 45-degree plate, a square edge, generally around about 12 mil, and a backing bar. And what it means there, if you decide to go down this pathway and try and qualify this type of joint configurations, this is where it allows us to do the combination with fillets. So as an inspector, what you would do is you would witness the first run, remembering that there must be a stop and start in the middle. They're allowed to dress that, but that's what you'd have to visual and see if it's compliant. Then you would witness the second and the third run, because this is going to be now a single layer and a multi-layer qualification. And if that then complies, then you look at, the fill and cap, and then it's the types of tests that we do, and we'll look at that further on. And if it naturally complies, then he's qualified for a single a multi-layer down and fillet. And then he's also covered for a PC butt weld. So there's ways and means that we can qualify operators. And like I've always said, it's a matter of knowing the types of joints that you could be dealing with as an inspector. Are most of you guys doing this for quality assurance in-house by any chance? Is that what you're going to be doing? Are you looking, Aaron, because you're the only one with the camera on at the moment, would you be doing well calls to this sort of nature, do you think?
Yeah, we're looking at doing 9606, but at the moment we're just got weld procedures for 1554.
And you've just qualified them to the procedures? Yeah, yeah. And that's quite common. But this just gives you a broader range of qualification. So when you're looking at doing this, have a look at the types of joints that you've got that you're going to be dealing with, and then work out what's the best outcome for for the business, and then you qualify that. Because a lot of the times what they'll do is, are you dealing with is it more structural steel stuff, Aaron, or?
Yeah, pretty much just heavy structural.
So you're looking more at like verticals, and are you doing butt welds in there as well?
Yeah, we do a lot of full strength butt welds.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, this is going to give you a broader range when you start looking at the options, particularly when we're looking here. So when you're looking there, we can do a butt weld, and it can cover, it says there, butt welds cover butt welds in any type of joint except a branch, but providing that the branch is equal to or greater than 60 degrees, you're covered for that. Butt welds in pipe qualify branch joints at any angle greater than 60 degrees. Welds that cannot be qualified by butt, fillet or branch connections less than 60 degrees, specific test piece is required. Qualifying fillets through a supplementary fillet weld test piece with requirements of this item. So what you'll notice too is when you go into the standard, and I'm going to read section part E. So with 5.4, we've got type of weld, and this is quite what you'll often see on the document too, is this notation here, 5.4E. Butt welds may qualify fillet welds if a supplementary fillet weld test is welded with each process, fillet material group and electrode covering in accordance to tables 3, 4 and 5. The test piece shall be at least 10 mil thick of the thickness of the butt weld test piece if the thickness is less, and completed using a single layer in the PB position. For this supplementary test, the welder shall be qualified for all fillet welds. Okay? So he could do a single layer. Let's say, for instance, Aaron, you've done a butt joint. Now, let's say you've got a multi-process going on here, right? So you've got, say, manual metal arc, and you've got, say, solid wire. And you've got those two processes in a butt joint. So you've used one for the root, and then the rest is cap and fill. If you then do a supplementary fillet weld with each process single layer, you'll automatically be covered for a multi-layer. So that's providing you've done the processes. So a manual metal arc one and a solid wire one with a 10 mil plate with the same consumable and everything like that, same material grouping, you'll automatically get a single layer and a multi-layer. And it's where it says there is the option. Fillet weld position PA and PB are qualified by this test. So you've got your options. You can do a butt joint and you can do a complementary fillet on the same, on the same document, or you can go to the annex and look at doing that type of joint configuration where you can qualify single, multi, and a butt joint as an option as well. So you would look at, let's say, for instance, you're looking at down end fillets and horizontal butts, but also then you've got vertical fillets and maybe a vertical butt. You could do two test pieces with the backing bar, though. That's the difference, because it'll only be stated that you're only qualified with backing. So if you did a full butt joint, though, then it's going to give you a wider range again. So it's a matter of using this standard and selecting the best option for what's going to be best suited for your individual business, and then qualify the operators to that. Does that make sense? You'll see where it sits in the standard as we go through. So if we look at filler material group, and this is a table. So let's say, for instance, and what you've got too is they reference the material groups like, when you look, Aaron knows, if you're looking at 1554, we've got a list of standards that we can reference, and we've got, our steel type numbers and the grades and different types of material. What they do, the ISO tend to do, is they group the steels by FM1, FM2, FM3, FM4, FM5. Now, there is a little table in the standard that tells you what FM1 is, what FM2 is, what FM3 is. So you'll start to see that your non-alloy and fine-grained steels, FM2, high-strength steels, FM3, creep resistant, so we're looking at chromium and molybdenum, FM4, creep resistant again, FM5, stainless, FM6, nickel. Okay, so they're giving us a broad range of materials to choose from. But when you go to qualifying with your filler group or your material grouping, it basically is quite simple. It says there, Table 2 outlines the filler material grouping systems, and the range of qualification comes from the table below. So what it means is, when we look at the designation, we will see an FM number, right? Now, when we're looking at what the range of qualification is always going to be governed on what FM number is being welded with. So if we looked at, let's say, for instance, your qualification is being done with an FM2 material grouping, well, we're now covered for an FM1 and an FM2, but we're not covered for 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right. So what you'll see on your document is your designation will say FM1, but your range of qualification might be missing FM2. Let's say you did it in FM3, means you're covered naturally for FM3, but also 2 and 1 without any requalification. It means that the range of qualification now covers you for those material groupings. All right. So this is why your range of qualification is quite broad and gives a much bigger bang for your buck when you're going down and looking at this standard. So that's your material grouping. So like I said, on your designation, you will see the material grouping. So when you're looking at the range of qualification, all we do is reference this table, particularly for our material grouping, and verify, did the range of qualification include the ones that are covered, or was it missing? And then then, all right, they're missing FM1 or whatever it may be. All right. So you've got that table for the range of qualification. Okay. Then we have another one, and this is where you'll probably spend a lot of time in this standard when you're doing your practical training, is your filler material grouping. So we have two tables here. We basically have one for naturally manual metal arc consumables, and then we have one for our flux core wires, our solid wires, and so forth. But it also includes our TIG wires and so forth as well. So if we have a look at filler material grouping, it's basically saying we've got the process, we've got manual metal arc, and then, of course, naturally, we've got our cellulose, basic, and so forth like that. All right. Remember, these are the last two digits on your consumable. All right. So 10 and 11 is the cellulose, 12s, 13s, and these are the flux coatings. So if you were to go back, if you were unsure about that, and we go back and we look at the coatings there, we've got the abbreviation in the standard. So it says there, what's an A? Means it's an acid covering. So we've got the numbers to identify there, an O3, a 10, 11. So you've got all the designations there of not only the actual electrodes, but also their coverings, okay? And what we can see there is, let's say, for instance, if we've done, let's say that 111, we've done a root run, we've used the number 11, means we're only covered for a 10 and 11, and then it's only cellulose, okay? And let's say we've done it with a basic electrode, okay? Let's say we've used a 16, all right? We've used a 16 TC, basic hydrogen controlled. We're naturally covered for naturally all this range here, and also the others, but we're not covered for cellulose electrodes. All right. So where we're checking and verifying this is naturally on what the range of qualification is, because we'll have seen on the left-hand side of the document what was done and what a consumable was used. And then we can verify that on the right-hand side, have we covered this range of qualification? So we'll be expected to see these numbers and these letters notated on that side if it's correct. Okay. And that's for your manual metal arc, of course. When we start going to solid wires and flux core wires, for instance. So let's say, for instance, we've used a solid wire. What else are we qualified to use? So when we start looking at solid wire, we've done it solid wire. M means we're covered for metal core, flux core wire. Only metal core though. We're not covered for the basic or the rutile type flux core wire here. If we've done it with metal core, naturally we're only covered for that and that. Let's say we've used flux core rod with basic. It means now we're covered for that, but also these other flux coatings is also in our flux core electrodes are also covered. So these are, as I said back there, if you look at them, they're talking about the actual, if we look at R or RR or W, we're looking at electrode core, basic fluorides, slow freezing slag, Y. So it's giving you the option there on what the range of qualification is. And if you look at these ones down here, you're only covered for that. So it's really simple once you got your head around where you're going to see what the operator's qualified from, knowing that designation from the get-go, that we can just verify and go, yeah, righto, he did solid wire on 135. What other filler material is he covered for? Well, we're allowing to weld metal core because naturally it's only a down and filler rod anyway. It's a very fluid consumable. It's only designed for the flat and horizontal vertical position. You might be able to use it in PC, a butt joint, but generally that's, it's very similar to solid deposition, the way it looks and so forth. So that gives you a range there that we'll look at. And like I said, we all backtrack over this in the training. So that's covering basically, we've looked at our material grouping that we can check the range of qualification for. We can check the coatings and the electrodes. We can also check the range of qualification in the filler material types to work out what range is there. We can 5.7 dimensions. Welded qualification test pieces of butt welds are based on deposited thickness and outside pipe diameters for range of qualification. But for fillet welds, the range of qualification is based on material thickness. So that's what you've got to look at when you start going through the range. Was it done so be aware when you're looking at the tables that we're looking at a butt table, or we're looking at pipe, or are we looking at fillets? So that's the key thing to look for. So we're looking at deposited thicknesses for butt welds and pipe diameters. And then we're looking for fillet welds is range of qualification in material thickness. So if we start to look at our first table around that, and we're looking at the range of qualification of deposited thickness of a butt weld. All right. So let's say, for instance, we've done a butt weld. Well, let's say we've done a pipe, and our material, a deposited thickness that we've seen on our designation. All right. So we've looked at a butt joint, and our designation said that the deposited thickness was 5 mil. Okay, let's say we deposited 5 mil. Now, we're looking at here. All right, so was it less than 3 mil? Well, we know it's 5. Then you go size to, 3. But see how you got these little letters here? These actually mean referencing these. So oxyacetylene weld is covered in here, and can be sort of, generally we tend to forget them a little bit. So we are talking deposited thickness here, all right? So let's say, for instance, we've done a root runs 5 mil. All right, so we're actually coming within this range. We're equal to, we're more than 3, but we're less than 12. So what it means for our range of qualification, we'll see on the left-hand side here that he's deposited 5 mil, okay? But then when we look on the right-hand side, we need to know what is he covered for. And what it's saying there is he's allowed to go down to 3 to 2 times the thickness. So now his range of qualification is 3 to 10 mil off that. So that's how we read that there, okay? So it's always governed from what we see on the left-hand side, and then we can verify that. All right, what was the deposited thickness? You know, if it was greater than 12, naturally it's 3 and upwards. What they'll do is they'll write it on the document like this. So if we've done a deposited thickness greater than 12 mil, they'll have this. They'll go 3, and then it'll go like that. That's how they'll do it on the document itself. They won't have an end range. But when we have a range where, in this case here, where it's fallen between this area here, it says, righto, minimum is he's allowed to weld to 3 because he deposited 5 mil, but now he can go down to 3 mil, but he can only go to 2 times the thickness of the weld, because that's what our deposited thickness is, S. So 2 times S. That little d there is referencing here. For oxyacetylene, we'd have to go 3 to only 1.5 times the deposited thickness. Okay, that would be his range of qualification there. So that's how that little table works. And we'll go, like I said, it'll be all revised to you when we do our practical training. Then we've got another couple of tables.
Would you please,
yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Would you please, is it possible to get back to the previous table?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one there?
Yeah. Would you please give an example for the bigger than 12 millimeters, how to calculate the range of qualification? 3, what does it mean? Is, for example, diameter, thickness diameter is, for example, 15.
Yeah.
And we can calculate range of qualification, for example.
So all it means there is if we've got it equal to or greater than 12 millimeters, the minimum he can start, or the lowest he can go, is 3 mil. But then it's infinite. You know, it doesn't matter. He can his range is unlimited. That's what that means there. Yeah,
thank you.
Because it's deposited thickness on a butt joint. So if you think about it, if he's deposited, let's say more than 15, like more than 12 millimeters, they'll say, right, he's allowed to go down to 3, but he's unlimited from 3 and upwards. It's only when you get to your multi-processors where you tend to find that what we want to determine there is the deposited thickness, what range has he got, because we've got, say, a multi-process. And it's generally more so when we're looking at a multi-process more than a single process, if you know what I mean. If we were to do a single process, well, that's it. We've only got one process. This is where it comes into it, where we're generally looking at multi-processes where one deposited thickness has gone in and then another one's gone on top of that. So we then look at them as separate. So let's say, for instance, Amir, we've done a butt weld. And like I said, with this one, his first run, his deposited thickness on a butt weld was 5 millimeters, right?
Yes.
So what it means there is when we start looking further on, we start to look at, single-sided material backing and so forth, and I'll explain that as we go through. But let's say this is generally where we're looking at more so a multi-process. So we've used 2 different processes. So we've used one to do a root run, and what he's done, let's say for instance he's put the deposited thickness, and that's not including how many runs that's gone in, Amar, right? So it's just how much weld has gone in at this time. And it's on a butt joint, and he's deposited, like I said, 5 millimeters from that one process. Okay, that's the deposit thickness that's been done on that weld joint when he did it. Okay, and that's going to be in the designation. That's where it's all going to come from. So we know that the deposited thickness of that first run was 5 mil. Now we look at the second deposited thickness, which let's say was, 15 mil.
Yeah, we're doing inspection.
Right, we've got 15 millimeters now on that second. So what it means is we now look at that one there. What is my range of qualification for that operator? So we then look at his deposited thickness and he's deposited 5 mil. So we then look at this area here. So it means, righto, we fall here. We're actually greater than that. That's equal to or less than 3, but less than 12. So we fall in that, right in that range. So it then says to me here, my range of qualification is 3 mil, 2 times the deposited thickness. In my case was 5, now becomes 10 millimeters.
Yes.
That's his range of qualification now on his document. When we start to look at the other one, which is now 15 mil, remembering that it also goes further on down the track when we start to look at the other tables in reference to single-sided, multi-layer material backing and so forth. Because when we look at that there, it's actually got material backing from this one, okay? So this one becomes a single layer, and this one becomes a multi-layer. But when you look at this one, this will also cover a multi-layer because it was single-sided. So we start to look at another table for that range of qualification. But in this case here, now we've looked at the second one, and the second one now doesn't fall within here. It's actually greater than 12 mil. So what it says there, it means my lower end is 3 millimeters to unlimited. That's his range of qualification. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's
Good. Thank you so much.
no worries. So that's how that works in relation to that, particularly a deposited thickness. And generally, we're more so looking at that from a multi-layer type process. If we've done one process, what we'll find there particular is it'll be 3 mil and to unlimited. You with me? It's only when we start looking at multi-processes that this is where that range of qualification may come into it. Righto. So when we look at the next few tables, we've got here a range of qualification for outside diameter pipe. So pretty simple to follow really, because we will be given a designation or the size of the diameter naturally on the designation side of it. So the diameter here, if it's less than equal to or less than 25 mil, we go 2 times the diameter is the range of qualification. If it's greater than 25 mil, then it's half the diameter and above, okay? So generally we go half the diameter times the diameter. So it would mean that depending what size it is. So let's say we've done it 300, okay? We should be then, it'd be 150 to the diameter, 300. It should be the range of qualification he's covered for, okay? Oh, sorry, 1.5 times the diameter. That's what it is, times the diameter. So half that, then times the diameter, and that's his range of qualification. Okay. Aaron, can you do a quick calculation for me? If you go half times the diameter, which is 300, tell me what you get then.
150.
Yeah, 150. That's what it is. Yeah. So that's so these range of qualification, let's say we did in 300, means that he's covered for 150 to 300. That's basically in his outside diameter range, qualified in. Okay. It says there for non-circular hollow sections, diameter is the dimension of the smaller side. So if you are qualifying operators to hollow sections, remember that that's the smaller side. Now, when we're looking at fillet welds, and this is what you've got to be very careful of when you're looking at the tables, that you are looking at the right one. So the last one was deposited thickness. That one was for outside the pipe diameter. And now when we start to look at fillet welds, it's now governed by material thickness. So it's the range of qualification now is governed on the material thickness, not the size of the fillet. So if we've got greater than 3 mil, it's going to be from 3 mil in thickness or up. Let's say, for instance, we're less than that. So the thickness to 2 times the thickness or 3 mil, whichever is the greater, is what his range of qualification is. So if we've done it in 10 mil, his range of qualification would be from 3 upwards in material thickness, particularly on fillet welds, and that makes sense. There's no, shouldn't be an issue with your material thickness. Like I said, they go on the deposit thickness for butt welds, but for fillets. So what you'll often find is on the document, and I wouldn't be surprised if you get this in your exam, where you'll have a butt joint as well as a fillet weld scenario sitting underneath it. All right. And then you just got to verify basically that range. And it's always done on 10 mil plate, because we read that back in here. All right. Especially when it comes to butt welds. Okay. Now, we're working our way down the document. And by the way the document's set up, would you believe, is actually in line with how these tables operate. So, and as you're working way down through the document, you'll see that these tables are in line as you work your way down the document. And then when we start getting into, your positioning, and because it's all in section 5, all these tables, it's now looking at the positioning. Now we do have 2 tables here. Naturally, we've got one for butt welds and we've got one for fillet welds. So you've got to be aware of that. And it's pretty straightforward when you're looking at it. So if I read their welding positions, note that for the welding 2 of pipes, and it's got clause 5.8, a PH or a PC, qualifies a HLO45, and a PJ and a PC qualifies a JLO45. So often you'll find in your examination, or even in a training, for instance, they'll give you a document that has this. So let's say, for instance, we've done it in this one. All right, what is going to be my range of qualification for a butt joint? We're going to be covered for a PA, a PC, a PE, and a PF. Okay, simple, pretty straightforward. It's not covered for vertical down. All right, it's not covered there. So what you'll often see in your document is on the left-hand side, they'll put H-LO45. Now your range of qualification may be missing all of that, or none of that, or they could just have a PA. Okay, so that's what you've got to pick up. You've got to be able to look at this, go to there and verify what the range of qualification is. So we're slowly working our way down our document in relation to whatever type of weld that's been done, and then we can work out what the range of qualification is. Now, if we look at it from a fillet weld point of view, we've got the similar sort of nature here. So it then, if it's done in a PB position, which is our horizontal vertical, our 2F, naturally we're covered for that and that, but we're not covered for anything else. So it's just a matter of going through and verifying it and aligning it up with these tables to see whether the range of qualification is matching up to what the tables are telling us. Okay, so that's your fillet welds. And then we have another table, and this is depending on your weld categories. The range of qualification is provided in tables 11, 12. So this is the one where what we look at is, when we look at the designation, they'll often write in that designation right at the top, and we'll see it as we go through the document, that if we've done a butt weld and we've done no backing, in other words, full peno, we should see this on the designation. We should see in brackets SS NB. So single-sided, no backing. So if we looked at the range of qualification and we've done a multi-process, for instance, we'd have to say, righto, my first run went in, single-sided, no backing, but what also range of qualification does that also offer me? We've already worked out the amount of deposited range that I've got, but also what can I be qualified because I've done that. And what you'll see is we're also covered for material backing, We're also covered for welding from both sides. We're also covered for gas backing. We're not covered for consumable insert, but also we're covered for flux backing. So when you're looking at multi-processes in particular, and you start to see, particularly the first run, if it was a full penetration butt joint, that's going to be written on the designation, but it won't have this. This comes in the range of qualification. So that's where you should be looking at seeing that information when you're looking at the document on the right-hand side. Thanks, Ben. All right. Now, if we look at the second run was done with material backing, because the first run is the material backing. So now the second run comes under this category here. What is the range of qualification now for that second run? Because it's a multi-process. So we'll have one range of qualification now for that one process, and now another range of qualification for the other process. Now we know that the second process was done in the material backing, because the first deposited material is what we consider material backing. So now we look at that, and he's covered for material backing, welding both sides, and that's all his range of qualification is. That's all he's governed for when you're looking at that document. So when you start looking at that, it's a matter of looking at the designation is the key thing, because that's going to establish where we're going to reference all of these tables so far, where that lines up. Okay. When we look at this next table, this is when we start looking at, multi-layer, single layer, multi-layer. And the key thing to look at here, when you're looking particularly at this particular table, is it basically says if you've done a single layer, you're only covered for a single layer. Okay. If we've done a multi-layer, we're naturally covered for a single layer. But what you've got to look for is down here. When a welder has qualified using a multi-layer butt weld, and he or she makes a supplementary fillet weld, and it may only be a single run fillet, he or she is qualified for both multi and a single layer fillet weld. Okay, so you'll see that in the designation. That'll be written there if they've done a supplementary fillet weld, and it'll only be a single run written on there. So it'll have down the left-hand side, fillet weld single layer. What you've got to verify on the range of qualification, it should have single layer and also multi-layer to cover it for those processes if that's been a supplementary. These are the things that are where we'd be checking. All right. And if you notice there, it actually gives us the clause. So 5.4E is where that is mentioned. If you were to go back through the standard, that's where it's mentioned. So they do that a quite fair bit in this particular standard. They'll often, have little notes and reference already clauses that have previously been spoken about or talked about or you've seen. And that's just your reference to go back and reread that to make sure that you've got it. So when we start to look through now, section 6, it now goes through basically the examination side of it. What types of testing is required. So we have to then verify that, particularly as we get down towards the bottom of the document, what tests were carried out originally. All right. So not so much, we're not looking here at the range of qualification as such. We're looking more so what was tested, and we just got to verify that testing was carried out and was correctly done. So 6.3 contains information in relation to the use of a PWPS or a WPS for the qualification test. The pre-qualified weld procedure test or the WPS number shall be marked on the welder qualification certificate. So we should be able to check that right at the top of the document. And then clause 6.4 provides information on the extent of testing required to qualify the welder, which can also be seen in table 13. So if we go to table 13, it then gives us what's required, what is mandated, and what we look for. So when we start to look at this table, it starts to tell us when we're looking at our document, has it got this information on it? Has it covered it? So first and foremost, let's say, for instance, we're looking at a butt joint. Was visual exam noted on the report? Because it's mandatory. Now, it's got here radiographic testing mandatory, but look, we got A, B, or C. So let's read what it says. A, either radiographic testing or bend or fracture tests shall be used. So either radiographic, so let's say we don't want to, we must do bends or fracture tests to tick the box. Okay, what does B say? B says where radiograph testing is used, then additional bend or fracture tests are mandatory for welding processes. So we're looking at MIG, MAG, and flux core, and of course oxyacetylene. All right, so they're looking at, all right, if we're going to use radiographic, particularly on those particular welding processes, we must also do additional bend and fracture tests. But then it's got C, radiographic testing may be replaced by ultrasonic testing but we must have a thickness equal to or greater than 8 mil. It's got to be ferritic steels. And in the case, the additional tests mentioned in footnote B are not required. So let's say we've gone radiographic, okay? It just means we're not required to do bends and fractures if we go down that pathway. So we've replaced radiographic. We've now gone to ultrasonic. It's not mentioning these welding processes as an issue. It just makes sure that it's equal to or greater than 8 mil. In that case, the additional tests mentioned in footnote B are not required. So it means that in this case, if we went to do ultrasonic, we should see on our test report a visual exam, a testing, and our ultrasonic. Okay. If we've gone down the pathway where we want to look at radiographic and we've chosen not to, we must see fracture tests or bend tests put in there. So we should see that on the report. So when you're going through your document, we've got to see what amount of testing was done. And we rely on this table to actually clarify the testing on it, what was done. And we just check that. Now it says D here, for outside diameter equal to or less than 25 mil, the bend or fracture test may be replaced by a notch tensile test or complete test. For fracture test may be replaced by a macro examination, and at least 2 sections. Fracture tests on pipes may be replaced by radiographic. So they're giving you options to utilize. So when you're looking at your documentation and we're looking at that, we must make sure that what we see on the test part, which is right at the bottom of the document, that these are actually right, where they're lining up with what this table says. Okay. So that's what you'd look at when you're looking at your testing side of it. Now, section 7, it talks about the acceptance requirements of test pieces. And then we start looking at naturally, your width of your test pieces, which is a table there. We've then got section 8, any retests that are required, and what they say about that. And then section 9, your initial qualification. So it says there, the welder's qualification begins from the date of the welding of the test piece, provided that the required testing has been carried out and the test results obtained were acceptable. The certificate needs to be confirmed every 6 months, otherwise it becomes invalid. All right. The validity period is to be chosen in accordance to 9.3 A, B, or C. So what it does there, if we look at that particular section, we can go, right, A, the welder shall be retested every 3 years. Or B, every 2 years, 2 welds made during the last 6 months for the validity period shall be tested by radiographic or ultrasonic testing or destructive testing and shall be recorded. The acceptance levels of the imperfections shall be specified, and would look at clause 7. The weld tested shall reproduce the original test conditions except for thickness and outside diameter. These tests revalidate the welder's qualifications for an additional 2 years. Or C, it says a welder's qualification for any certificate shall be valid as long as it's confirmed according to 9.2 and provided all the following conditions are fulfilled. So the welder is working in the same manufacturer for whom he or she qualified and is responsible for the manufacturing product. The manufacturer's quality program has been verified in accordance to ISO 3834-2 or -3. The manufacturer has documented that the welder has produced welds of acceptable quality based on application standard. The welds examined shall conform or confirm the following conditions: the welding position, welding type, material backing or no material backing, and so forth. So what it means is we've got options there on how we validate our operators. All right. So 3834 is one of those quality standards that a lot of companies are going down the pathway, and that gives you strict regulations and naturally being operators qualified to 9606. But it says there, basically, you just got to provide evidence that they're welding continually to a certain level, a certain quality. So most of our standards will often say, if you're going to go down the 3-year pathway, Aaron, let's say, for instance, you've got to provide some evidence of every 6 months, some form of an NDT report to back it, is the way. If you go down the 2-year pathway, it's just ticking a box more or less every 6 months to say that the welder is still working within his range of qualification. And also I often like to see NDT back up with that if you can. And then of course, if you go down 3834 pathway, well, it's just a matter of the supervisor ticking the box saying, yep, we're still compliant with 3834. So they're the options that you've got, particularly from your validation side of it. So most of the times, a lot of the times they will go down the 3-year pathway, providing they can validate their operators every 6 months. In other words, provide evidence that they're complying, all right, and they're working within that range of qualification. 9.2, basically conformity, qualifications of welder, process shall be confirmed every 6 months, is what we've just talked about, by the person responsible for welding activities or examiner body. So whether you've got a welding supervisor or you're doing that role, whatever it may be, you're that person that ticks that box. This is confirmed the welder has worked within the range of qualification and extends the validity of the qualification for another further 6 months. So really what you're doing, even though he's qualified for 2 years, right, without having to retest him, you still got to tick a box or verify his validation every 6 months. And that works a lot with most of our Australian standards anyway. So that's not something uncommon. A lot of guys say, I just tick a box every 6 months, and that's fine. But if you get audited, you might have to provide some sort of evidence that how did you prove that the guy was welding within that range of qualification. You've got no NDT reports to back it. You with me? It's a little awkward one there. Revalidation is what I just spoke about. That's 9.3. Talk about that. And then section 10 is basically saying what should be on the welder's documentation, and section 11 is what we should see in the designation side of it. In other words, when we start to look at that document right at the beginning, we need to be able to see those things that are written there. You with me? So that's the first thing. When you're looking at a document in particular, get your head around the designation, because that's all the information that's going to point you in the right direction in working out what range of qualification or what range he's qualified in. All right, and verify that on the left-hand side. That lines up. Yeah, that's right. Then we start looking at the range of qualification. What is he covered for, and so forth. So if you are developing welder quals, let's say for instance, because you guys will be able to do that at this level. In other words, come in and maybe be, witness the welding, and then you're there to verify, and fill out the reports. then it's important that you understand where the range of qualification comes from and how you're going to put it on a report. Because that's your typical, what you're going to see is a classic ISO weld qualification to 9606. Okay. So having your head around that and working out where it's daunting at first, I must admit, when you first start to look at it and trying to get your head around it. But after a while, you start to see how it works, and it's actually formatted exactly the way the standard is. In other words, what we're looking at and what we're checking. And also too, there's also a section in here, guys, when you're looking at your bend test report, there's information in here that will ask you to reference. And while I've got it open, I may as well read it, because this is something you will be verifying on your bend test report that you'll be looking at. It says here, bend test specimens shall not reveal any discrete discontinuity equal to or greater than 3 mil in any direction. Discontinuities appearing at the edges of the test specimen during testing shall be ignored in the evaluation unless there's evidence that cracking is due to incomplete penetration, slag, or other discontinuity. The sum of the greatest discontinuity exceeding 1 mil but less than 3 mil in any one bend specimen shall not exceed 10 mil. So you might have 3 or 4 pieces in there that's cracked, say for instance, providing they're under 3 mil and it doesn't calculate the whole lot to 10 mil, it's compliant. So that's something I mentioned to the IWI-Bs a couple of weeks ago when they did their practical training. Because when you first read it, you think if you've got any discontinuity in the bend it's 3 mil and over, it fails. Well, each individual one does. But let's say you've got 3 or 4 in there and they're all sitting a mil. They were adding them up and getting to over 3 mil and then saying it doesn't comply. And I said, well, when you read that, if they're under 3 mil and then you add them all together, providing it's under 10 mil, it's still compliant, you see. So you'll see that when we go into the bend test report that you've got, because they'll give you an image, they'll give you the discontinuity and size it all up for you, because you don't have a physical bend to examine. It's actually the document with a photo on it, and we've just got to go through and verify that it's all lining up. Generally, you find that the formers are wrong, that the distance between the formers wrong, temperature might be wrong, but also when we go down to that part, they'll give you the actual size of the discontinuity, and you have to say it complies or it doesn't. All right. Okay, so that's 9606. That's one that you will, if you can get your head into that a little bit before you come, it'll be definitely very beneficial for your training and working that out. Now we're going to go over the next standard. Okay, so this one here is a little bit more detailed for you guys than the IWI-B. So that one there, have you guys printed them off yet? Yep, that's good. All right. So with this one in particular,
sorry, can I have one question before starting the new standard?
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to be talked about that tomorrow, but I have a question relevant to radiography examination test. Due to the Australian standard and ASME standard for the radiography of ultrasonic for less than 6 millimeters, which kind of actually some subcontractors and welding fabricators believe that ultrasonic and radiography don't need to be applied for thickness less than, I think, 6 millimeters. Based on the ISO standard, that's okay, that's correct or not?
See, the ISO standard stipulates ultrasonic can only be formed on equal to or greater than 8 mil. is where
8
they,
mil, yeah.
yeah. So
What's happening for the less than 8 mils?
so often they'll go for radiographic. Will be more the option there. It all will actually often depend on the joint configuration. You know,
Yeah,
some joints, you know, we can't you know, get a good image. So
Yeah.
joints and things like that. So where you're looking at, when you're looking at, you know, particularly our Australian standards, what we've got to consider is, you know, the material thickness, the density when it comes to radiographic, and the joint configuration is going to determine, can we get a good enough image to get that. So sometimes radiographic is not the way we can do it. So let's say we can't do ultrasonic. All right, so
Yeah,
then we might have to look at other options where we can make it compliant through maybe tensile test or from a butt joint. So we could do a butt weld, and then we might be able to use you know, a tensile test, a hardness test, and they will automatically qualify it without, you know, X-ray or ultrasonic, because they'll give us the range, they'll give us the options, and we're allowed to do that. So it's not always. Are you looking more so, Amir, at on the job or actually?
Yeah, on the job. This is the subcontractor believes
Yeah,
that
okay.
based on the standard 4041.
Yeah,
The thickness of the stainless steel pipe
yeah,
is 6 millimeters,
yeah,
and ultrasonic test and UT test can be kind of incorrect, get incorrect resolution results.
yeah,
Only they are going to follow PT.
yeah,
This is the something less
yeah,
than for this thickness.
yeah. So ultrasonic is best suited for over 8 mil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I mean, they can. I think. Look, I'll be honest with you, Amir. I have done it. I've had a guy do it on 6 mil, but it is recommended for 8 mil and up to give us, you know, that better chance of picking up a discontinuity. It is often where you find the joint configuration is the key issue for more than X-ray. X-ray is generally, I mean, not, you know, pipe work and stuff like that is generally, a lot of companies will go down the pipe work part, you know, X-ray pathway. It's just, yeah, it can be a tricky one actually, to be honest with you. Definitely. Yeah, it's awkward. Is the client specifying that, Amir, or not?
No. This is it. The client specification refer to Australian standard. Yeah.
Yes.
Refer to Australian standard. Subcontractor believes that the thickness is less than 8 millimeters.
Yep.
And they are going to do, due to some failures may happen for due to ultrasonic and also radiographic test. Only penetrant test is going to be carried out. This is their policy.
Yeah. Often you'll find clients are like that. They want specific form of NDT, and what's the percentage that is required? You know, is it 1554 Part 1?
Sorry.
What standard are you working to?
4041.
Oh,
piping.
Oh,
pressure.
your pressure vessel. Yeah, pressure piping. Yeah, 4041. Yeah, that's your design standard for your piping. Yeah, okay. So
they refer also 4041 and 4037 for the NDT.
4037 is where your discontinuity tables are. Yeah. So you're working in the pressure side of things. Yeah, so that's where it does become with piping. Generally, you'll find X-ray is the go-to that they want. Ultrasonic, on the other hand, could be a little bit difficult you get a better probably outcome with X-ray on piping, more so than anything. So are you doing any dye-pen or mag particle as well, or not?
For piping, actually, the majority of ways the subcontractor are going actually being used by subcontractors is PT and between UT and RT, one of them to be selected, will be
Yeah.
selected. Yeah,
Are you-
this is
are
the
you dealing-
MT is going to be used in the actually in
So
industrial for the steel
Yeah,
structure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Are you dealing with stainless piping, Amir?
yeah.
Yeah.
Stainless piping. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It all makes sense now.
That's hard.
You got your hands full, mate.
Yeah. Thank you for explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so this standard that we're going to go through now, gents, is basically the one. It's not a thick standard, as you can see again. But what you're going to be doing is verifying, the document and referencing this particular. The difference between you guys from an IWIB and to an IWI-S is with an IWIB, all they've got to do is see if the information is there. That's it. Has it got that? Has it got that? Has it got that? Whereas you, on the other hand, have to verify and check the actual information. Actually physically check it and make sure that it's lining up with this type of document. So very similar in the sense that there's going to be key things in here that is all, where you're going to go level 1, level 2. There's going to be things there you got to look at, and you might do some little calculations that might be involved in there. So let's have a look at the scope. So it says this document specifies how preliminary welding procedure specification is carried out by a welding procedure test. So you're doing WPQR. This document applies to production welding, repair welding, and build-up welding. This document defines the conditions for the execution of welding procedure tests and the range of qualification for welding procedures and all practical welding operations within the qualification of this document. So you will see the range of basically the testing requirements. And this is very similar, Amir, to ASME 9 in pressure. Okay, so the levels in here are very similar to ASME 9, and they do reference ASME 9 in this standard. So we are looking at the sort of the pressure side of it. The primary purpose of a weld procedure qualification is to demonstrate that the joining process proposed for construction graded joints have the required mechanical properties of the intended application. It's got 2 levels of welding procedure tests are given. Graded permit application to a wide range of welded fabrication. They are designated by levels 1 and 2. In level 2, the extended testing is greater and the range of qualification is more restrictive than level 1. So very similar, Amir, when you're looking at 4037, your range of discontinuities is very similar in what they'll accept and what they won't. So when you start looking at your document, you've got to verify with the document, are they covering in level 1 or level 2? And it's right at the top of the document, right on the first page you look at, you'll know straight away what level that you're going to be checking on when you start to navigate your way through the standard. So procedures carried out at a level 2 automatically qualify for level 1 requirements, but not vice versa. A lot of our standards, Australian standards, work the same way. If we look at weld categories in our 1554 series, if we do a test piece for fatigue purposes, it'll cover us for structural and general purpose. So ISO are very similar in that sense. If you do a more tighter testing requirements and it complies, it will automatically cover you for those lower levels, but not the lower level going to a higher level. So often you'll see companies qualifying, to pressure vessel standards and also be covered for structural at the same time, because they're covering their options. So they don't have to redevelop weld procedures and so forth. So often if you're looking at developing these sort of documents, think of what other range of qualifications standard-wise can you cover yourself at the same time, particularly if your testing requirements is a high level, right? Think of it, can I cover, what else can I cover, and get that documented as well, and then you'll be covered. Then you can use the test document, the test document there is then can cover those lower ones because you've done it at a higher level. So we know now that level 2 automatically will qualify level 1, but not vice versa. So as we go through this document, what we'll see is, 2 is normative again, just referencing standards. Number 3, terms and definitions. Same thing as what we saw in 9606 actually. And then it jumps. It really starts to, 4, preliminary welding procedure specification. It's just saying that it has to be prepared in accordance with this standard. Okay, that's what that means. And then 5, section 5, weld procedure test. The welding and the testing of test piece shall be in accordance to clause 6 and 7. So the testing requirements. So we're developing a WPQR. This is going to give us the testing requirements. And as you can see, we're at a very high level in this category. And then we start looking at, so I've gone to 4, all right, 5, 6, shape and dimensions of our test pieces. So that gives us our figures. So the minimum widths and the lengths of a butt joint, a pipe, pipe joint, fillet weld, branch joints. We've got all that information in the site. So what we're doing with this document is we're developing a WPQR. So what you're looking at is the WPQR has been developed, and what you're doing is verifying that the information on that document is aligning up with this one. All right, that's what you've got to look at. All right. So section 6 gives us all the details of our dimensions of our pieces. Okay. And it's got, branch connections, level 1, no specific test piece required. Level 2, for a branch, the test piece shall be prepared in accordance to figure 4. And then we've got it there. And it basically says, your minimum dimensions and so forth. So you've got the sizes of your test piece. If you're developing a WPQR to this standard, these are the size pieces that you need to reference and go by. Okay. And they do vary from standard to standard, of course, when you start looking at this. When you're looking at section 7, and it does move quite quickly because there's only like a sentence for a section or something like that. It doesn't take long before you're halfway through the standard. This is where our examination and testing is required. So 7.1, you'll notice that it's actually split a little bit there. So you've got 1 and level 2 and the requirements there. So what you'll see there, level 1, the type of an extender testing shall be in accordance with the requirements of table 1. If impact testing, hardness testing, or NDT is required by an application standard or a specification, they shall, and if we ever see the word shall, means it's mandatory, be carried out and assessed in accordance with the requirements of level 2 unless otherwise specified. So let's say, for instance, you're developing a procedure to ISO 15614-1, but you want it also to cover, let's say, if level 2, for instance, the testing requirements is a higher than, let's say, fatigue purposes in structural, you can automatically be covered for that because the testing requirements is going to be much tighter, more stringent, and probably more, and that will allow you to be covered for that. If you develop a procedure for FP category, it will automatically be covered for that. So you can use this document for lower, make sure that you stipulate other standards that you want to use it for. So whenever you're developing any sort of WPQR, think of any other standard that you may cover from that. And then you can utilize that procedure as well. And that WPS will also be covered for that. Because you'll have the mechanical test report that is going to go above and beyond those lower levels. But what it does, it saves you from redoing it all and having it retested, because this automatically is a much tighter area. So if you can develop that, get that to tested at this higher level, it can automatically, but make sure you stipulate it on the document that you also wanted to cover these other standards that you might be working to. All right. So level 2, type and extended testing shall be in accordance with the requirements of table 2. So you'll have a look in the standard and you'll see 2 tables. So table 1, very, very small. and it's basically saying a butt joint full penetration. We're required to do visual testing 100%. We have to do transverse tensile test. We need 2 specimens, and a transverse band test. We need 4 specimens. Now it says there A, footnote, band test C's clause 7.4.2. Fillet welds, we're required to do visual testing 100%. And then your macro, you need 2 specimens out of that for it to require. It says there B, the mechanical properties are required by application standard. It shall be tested accordingly. In additional test pieces needed, the dimensions should be sufficient enough to allow testing or mechanical properties. For this additional test piece, the welding parameter range, parent metal group, filler metal, and heat treatment are required to be the same. So fillet welds at the moment for a level 1, all we're required to do is visual examination, 2 macros. But if we look at level 2, we've got a little bit more to look at here. So let's have a look at level 2. It says there, butt joint with full penetration. This is what's required. We look at visual testing, 100%. Now we could have radiographic or ultrasonic, whichever we've chosen to use, but that must be 100%. Surface crack detection, 100%. So we could look at, dipend mag particle for that. Then we'll have to do 2 transverse tensile tests, 4 bend tests, 2 impact tests. Hardness may be required, macro, 1 specimen. But let's look at the footnotes. Radiographic and ultrasonic A. Ultrasonic testing shall be used if the thickness is, ultrasonic testing shall not be used if the thickness is less than 8 mil and not of a material group of 8, 10, 41 to 48. Okay, so specific on material. Footnote B. Accessible weld surfaces, penetrant testing or mag particle testing. For non-magnetic materials, penetrant testing is required. So that surface crack detection, we must do dipend or mag particle. If it's a non-magnetic, then we're only limited to dipend. And then when we go to, let's say, a T-joint or a branch, we start looking at visual testing 100%, surface crack detection. If it's a branch, ultrasonic 100%, hardness test may be required. E, it says not required for parent metal subgroups 1 of 1, groups 8 and 41. Now we've got those groupings in this standard, all right? So it's a bit like the FM1, FM2, FM3. We have groupings and subgroupings, and it's all material based. A 1.1, a 1.2, 1.3. So we could, do a test piece on a 1.3. It'll also cover us for a 1.2 and a 1.1. Very similar to what we saw in 9606. But remember what we're doing here is we're developing a WPQR. At 9606 is welder qual. So we are now looking at a range of qualification that we can also have on our WPQR. And then the 9606 is a separate range of qualification for that operator. All right. If you look at a fillet weld, it's required to have basically 100% visual, surface crack 100%, hardness test if it's required, and it says there if it's depending on material type, and 2 macros. So it is governed a little bit on your materials on some of the stuff there in your footnotes, but something that you be aware of. So when we're looking at our document, for instance, first and foremost, we've got to determine basically what our materials are, and then we can determine, the type of joint, what level's it at, and then verify that the extent of NDT or destructive testing has been performed to clarify that it complies. All right. So it says there, section 7.2, location and taking of test specimens. So this naturally follows, when you turn it over, it shows you exactly where the location is. And remember, most of the time, these will be taken to a lab and done. So they're fully aware on where the samples have to be taken from if we are working to this ISO standard. And the thing is, the reason we have to teach you this and go through this is because it's an international qualification you're getting. I mean, normally we wouldn't be developing a WPQR with this standard. We're often going using our Australian standards. And so naturally, we have to put you through this document. And you probably never go through this document again if you're referencing Australian standards, you with me? So you'll only do the testing requirements to whatever are Australian standards. But the fact that you're doing an international qualification, and that international qualification stipulates that you must, these guys overseas would be using this document to qualify their WPQRs. And unfortunately, that's why we have to do it. Last year, when we did an IWI-S, you had to do it to 3992, and we were referencing all our Australian standards. But the IIW have come back and said, no, not anymore. We have to use these standards. I agree with 9606 because that's definitely been implemented a fair bit. But this one, on the other hand, is a different kettle of fish, all right? But it's only required for you to do your examination, all right? You may not use it in your working career at all right? So 7.3, non-destructive testing. This clause outlines the requirements for NDT when called into accordance to tables level 1 and level 2, tables 1 and 2. So that goes back to, when we're looking at our surface crack detection, that's where they're looking at the NDT and the radiographic and so forth. So that goes back to there. Clause 7.4, it talks about destructive testing and basically references the standards on the particular size and sample. So they reference those ISO standards and those particular pieces like a transverse tensile test. The information comes from 4136, and naturally any lab that's doing any testing for you naturally does the samples to what the required size is. So transverse tensile bends. One thing it doesn't say in here that we noticed in 9606, particularly in the bend tests, so it says there, I'll read that tensile one. Tensile strength of the specimen shall not be less than the corresponding specified minimum values for the parent material unless otherwise specified prior to testing. So it's got to fall within the ranges of the material. So naturally, most standards have already got a percentage, so 95% of the MPA, the material, or something of that nature. The bends is ISO 5173. During testing, the specimen shall not reveal any imperfection greater than 3 mil in any direction. Imperfections appearing at the corners of the test specimen during the testing shall be ignored in the evaluation. Now, the funny thing about that is, when we read that in 9606, it basically also said that if you got any discontinuities that we prove that, like on the face of the bend, it doesn't exceed 3 mil, complies. But we could have multiples and we can add them together, providing they don't go over 10 mil, it's compliant. And that does not say that in here at all. So what it's saying here, 3 mil in any direction appear in the corners. So to me, for a WPQR qualification, means that your specimen can't have a discontinuity any bigger than 3 mil. So 3 mil's the max. But on a welder qual, on a bend test, it's a little bit different. They'll allow, multiple smaller imperfections, providing they don't add up to 10 mil. So sometimes there's a variation on a particularly when it comes to testing, on a WPQR test requirements compared to welder qualification requirements. All right, so there's often, and you think about it, if we've done all the testing here and we've proven it, all we're trying to find out is whether the welder can weld to that WPS. All right, so the testing requirements is a little bit less. Okay, macros, it just basically says there that we are, it should be in accordance to ISO 17639. Acceptance level shall be in accordance to 7.5. So what we've got now is basically, they're talking about the destructive tests inside of it. So transverse tensile test, bend test, macro. We often see these in our Australian standards anyway. Impact testing, hardness testing, the values there. But then it goes into, when we're looking at impact testing there, it gives us the values and what it should be. For joints between materials with the same material specification and designation, the absorbed energy shall be in accordance with the appropriate parent metal. So what we'd be looking for, in all honesty, is when we're looking at our document, for instance, okay, when you guys are doing this in your exam, remember that where all our testing always happens is always at the bottom of the document, all right? So you'll meticulously work your way through the document, but what we've got to verify is when we come down and we start looking at the testing requirements, that these are lining up with what's required, okay? So we'll go through this on the training day anyway, all right? Impact testing, I said, we've gone through that. The average value of the 3 specimens shall meet the specified requirements. And what we're looking for there is, let's say, for instance, on our document, we've got impact testing done. We've just got to verify that it falls within the values to make sure that that part of it's compliant. Same with the hardness testing when you go through that. So when it says Vickers hardness testing there, load HV10. 10 stipulates the amount of kilos that's used to do the indentation. So 10 kilos is the actual weight that's forced in when they do the test, and then it's released. Where more than one welding process is used, each welding process that has been tested at least 1 row of indentation. So naturally, when you're looking at a hardness test, they'll often do a macro, and then they'll do the parent metal, the heat affected zone, and the weld metal. And if we've got multiple processes in there, let's say we've got 2, they're saying there we've got to have at least 1 row in each welding process. Oh no. Hardness testing again, each row of indentation, at least 3 individual indentations shall be made in each of the following areas: weld metal, heat affected zone, and parent metal. So say both heat affected zones. So if we've got a butt weld, it's going to be on either side. For the heat affected zone, the first indentation shall be placed as close to the fusion line as possible. Now we know this is done in the lab. This is not something that you guys would be looking at, but what we're looking for is, let's say for instance on your document, and it's quite a large document you'll be looking at, they should have an image of a hardness test and you should be able to see that, and that should line up. So in other words, what you're going to get is your welding documentation, and any of these tests that are being done, you should have separate documents lining up to that document there. So there's quite a lot of information that you've got to work your way through, particularly in this document, all right? Section 7.5, we've got our acceptance levels. So what you'll see there on table 4, you do have a table 3, which is your hardness values. So what we would do there, if we've done hardness tests and we've seen the report, we just got to make sure that the hardness values line up with what the table says. But then our acceptance levels here, what we've got in this table in particular is it references 5817. So 5817 is a discontinuity table. It's a bit like in 4037, I mean, where you've got your category 1, 2, and 3. Well, 5817 is a very similar sort of scenario where we have a list of imperfections and we've got our weld categories. But what they've done in this particular document is they've gone, righto, for this particular document, all we need to know is basically what we've got is what they've got there is the reference number that you can get, and 5817 is not a bad standard to have anyway, but you've got the reference number there. So you could look 1.1, it'll talk about crack, all right? And it says level 1, not permitted, level 2, which is category B in 5817, okay? It's saying it's not permitted. So lack of fusion, incomplete penetration, continuous undercut, intermediate, it's level C in 5817, okay? So if you're referencing it says there, the acceptance levels for imperfections corresponding to level 1 and level 2 are given in table 4. So you may have to reference, you know, they're only showing you a few things here and the categories. So what you've got in 5817 is 3 well categories, C, B, and D. All right, and B being the toughest one. All right, would you believe? So these, what you've got to verify is when we're doing developing a WPQR and we're looking at if we've got any of this, or particularly also on your welder quals, that they fall in line with this and the levels that you're looking at. Okay, a lot to take in, isn't it? For, you know, for this is only 2 documents and you've got multiple documents to look at, you know, x-ray documentation, NDT reports. Well, you know, there's quite a lot of documentation you've got to go through. And this is just an extension of that table there, gents. But it tells you, even though it says level 2, quality level is B, or for if it's excessive froth thickness, C, and so forth. All right. Now, section 8 goes through the range of qualification. So remember that we're developing a WPQR, but it also got to have a range of qualification on that WPQR. 9606 is the range of qualification for the operator. We want to know a range of qualification for this document in particular. So this is where all that section sits, right in here. So if we look at section 8, says there, changes outside the ranges specified shall require a new procedure test. In other words, like anything, if we jump outside what we've proven, naturally we have to re-qualify. 8.2 related to the manufacturer, a weld procedure test according to this document prepared by the manufacturer is valid for welding in a workshop or sites when the manufacturer who performed the welding procedure test retains the complete responsibility of all welding carried out. So then when we start looking at our ranges, we start looking at parent metal, a range of qualification with steel groups and so forth. So what you've got to look at when you're looking at these particular tables is be aware of what they say, you know, the steel groups, subgroups, and material type, because there's a few tables in here, but they're also covering nickel alloys, all right? So be very aware of that when you're flicking through it, that you're in the right table when you're looking at it. So what it basically means when you're looking at these, and it's just showing you there, we've got test, you know, piece of material B or A is a material 2. We've done a 1, so 2 and a 1. We're also covered for a 2 and a 1 and a 1. Let's say we did material 2 and 2. We're covered for 2, a 2 and a 1, and a 1 and a 1. It's just the range of qualification that on that WPQR will automatically have. So that's something that you will definitely be looking at on your documentation when you're going through it. All right. So this is another table there, gents, again. So that's just going through the nickel alloys. So the test piece of material A. So they often refer them to by numbers and they'll just look at them. I think you'll find where you guys will be, it'll be in this table here. All right. So that table goes over 2 pages. That's where you'll probably tend to be. And I believe that you'll be in around about that, you know, 8.1 scenario. Because what it says at the bottom of that table says, A, test materials in groups 1, 2, and 3 and 11 qualify the equal or lower specified minimum yield strength steels independent of material thickness. Test piece materials in groups 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9 qualify steels in the same subgroup and lower subgroup within that same group. So we've got a big range. Test piece materials in group 7 and 10 qualify steels in the same subgroup. So there's quite a broad range of qualification there. All right, gents, I think what we'll do, we'll call it a day, and then we'll finish this off tomorrow. And then what I want to show you also tomorrow is I'm going to show you how the structure will be when you come in to do your practical training. All right. So how we're going to format it, what you're going to need to do, what you're going to need to bring with you guys when you turn up. Are you all coming to Wollongong? Do you know? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll fill you in tomorrow. I'll also go through what you need to revise for your theory exam as well. All right. What I want you to focus on in your theory examination. Has Bailey spoken to you about that yet? Has he mentioned any about your theory exam when you do it? What he needs you to focus on? If he hasn't, I'm going to do that with you guys tomorrow anyway. So we'll finish this off tomorrow. We'll go over the actual what's going to be required when you do. Waiting to see if Brisbane comes available. Okay, Craig. We'll go through what's going to happen on your practical training days and get you ready for that. And also what I want you to study for your theory examination. Okay. All right, gents. See you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
No worries.